The level of uncertainty has risen dramatically over the past 2+ weeks since Russia invaded Ukraine, and the news flow is continuous and market moving. We've seen a repricing of risk here as investors demand more compensation to accept this increased uncertainty and also to accommodate for some significant changes to the near-term fundamental outlook for growth and inflation. Now, what makes this environment particularly tricky for investors is not just the war that Russia has waged on Ukraine, the related increase in commodity prices, and intense economic sanctions waged by the Western world on Russia, but the fact that this is a war being fought on the private front as well, as many companies are self-sanctioning. They're leaving Russia, shutting down businesses, and refusing to trade at any cost. The implications of this are really unknown, as it's unprecedented at the scale and scope. So, both base cases and risk cases have been updated at our recent Investment Policy Committee meeting to reflect the prominence of this uncertainty surrounding the geopolitical outlook in financial markets and our unfortunate premise that there is no quick, easy, or good solution to the conflict right now. Our base case is that the war in Ukraine represents a potential growth shock to Europe and the emerging markets, and a global inflationary shock as well. Although the U.S. is more insulated from the direct impact on the growth front, there's no debating that inflationary aspects, primarily through the commodity transmission mechanism, will be felt around the world. And this comes at a time of already elevated inflation. We think a recession can be avoided in Europe given the potential fiscal stimulus and the strength of the economy coming into this crisis, but it's a close call. Now, emerging markets are particularly vulnerable to the rising cost of food and energy. So in terms of risk cases, one risk is, of course, that we're underestimating the impact of global growth, including the U.S., and the resulting hit to earnings of a protracted conflict in Ukraine. The second and most important risk here is the military escalation, including the use of unconventional weapons such as cyber attacks, as well as the omnipresent threat of nuclear warfare. So what are investors to do amid all this uncertainty? We continue to recommend that investors revisit their financial goals and affirm their risk preference around those goals. If your goals are inflation sensitive, lifestyle spending, for example, make sure you have your inflation hedges in place. If your strategies remain aligned with funding your goals over time, don't do anything. Stick with your strategies and avoid the obvious behavioral pitfall of selling equities into weakness. We can look at history as a guide here, and that suggests that geopolitical risk does not leave a lasting imprint on markets, and also that market returns after periods of extreme volatility, like this period, tend to be positive 12 months later.